There are roads that connect cities, roads that cross deserts, roads that vanish into ordinary distance. And then there are roads that seem to challenge the idea of a road itself, places carved into cliff faces, laid across tidal flats, pushed through avalanche country, or stretched across thousands of miles of emptiness for reasons too urgent to ignore. On these routes, danger is not a sudden interruption, it is part of the design. High above Bolivia's capital, the old North Yungas Road leaves the cold air of the Andes and begins to fall. It drops from the high country near Lacumbe toward the humid Yungas, where the mountains soften into forest and cloud. On a map, it is only a mountain road. In motion, it feels like a ledge cut into weather. The old route is narrow. In places, it offers little separation between tire and void. Water spills across the surface. Fog closes in without warning. Mud and loose stone turn the simplest correction into a gamble. For years, this road carried buses, trucks, and local traffic through one of the sharpest transitions in South America, from thin, cold altitude to wet subtropical slopes. The danger never came from one feature alone. It came from the combination: exposure, weather, traffic, fatigue, and a road that left almost no room for recovery. Even today, after newer infrastructure reduced much of its old traffic burden, the route still carries the force of reputation, because the landscape itself has not changed. The cliff is still there, the mist still moves uphill, the waterfalls still break across the track, and every bend still asks the same question: how much control do you really have? But some of the world's most dangerous roads do not hang over canyons at all. Some wait in silence, flat and open, until the sea comes back. On France's Atlantic coast, between Beauvois-sur-Mer and the island of Noirmoutier, the Passage du Gois looks almost impossible the first time you see it. A straight line across the bay, open sky, wet sand, a roadway laid where a roadway should not be. At low tide, it appears, cars, bicycles, and pedestrians cross, but the Atlantic does not negotiate. A few hours later, the water returns and covers the route completely. This is not a metaphor. The road disappears under the sea. That changes the psychology of risk. On a cliff road, danger feels immediate. On the Gois, it feels delayed, almost polite. The sky may remain bright, the horizon may stay calm, but the margin of safety is written by tides, not by the driver. Misread the timetable, underestimate the speed of the incoming water, or lose traction on the slick surface left behind by the sea, and a crossing can turn into an emergency with shocking speed. Rescue towers rise above the causeway for a reason. They are reminders that this road is older than the bridge that now links the island more reliably to the mainland, and that people have always been tempted to trust their own timing more than the ocean's. Here, danger does not roar, it advances. In New Zealand, the threat changes again. Skipper's Road does not disappear, and it does not descend through cloud forest. It clings to canyon walls above the Shotover River near Queenstown, a route born in the 19th century when gold pulled people into country that had little interest in being accessed quickly or safely. The road still feels historical in the most unsettling way. Not picturesque history, functional history, the kind that leaves behind narrow ledges, blind bends, loose gravel, and the uncomfortable sense that vehicles arrived after the route had already been decided. In dry conditions, the dust lifts and hangs in the air. In wet conditions, the surface becomes less forgiving. The drops are steep enough to dominate the mind even when the vehicle remains centered. And because so much of the road is narrow, the presence of another vehicle becomes its own event. Modern warnings are blunt. This is not a casual detour. It is a route that still demands judgment, patience, and skill. not because it has been preserved as a stunt, but because the terrain never offered an easy alternative. That is part of what makes roads like this so compelling. They are not dangerous by theme, they are dangerous because someone needed passage, and this was the passage they could make. In the Himalayas, the scale becomes larger and the margin smaller. Zoji La, on the route linking Kashmir with Ladakh, rises into a landscape where weather can close the conversation altogether. This is one of those roads where danger is not only under the tire, it is above it, beside it, and in the air itself. Snowfall can block the pass, avalanche risk can shut movement down. Clearance teams work against time, terrain, and exposure, trying to keep a route open that nature repeatedly tries to erase. At this altitude, the mountain strips away comfort. The air is thinner, the wind has an edge, visibility can collapse in drifting snow or dirty mist. A road that looks manageable from one turn can disappear around the next into slush, rock, or ice. Yet this is not merely a route for thrill seekers. It is a critical connection used by civilians, freight in the state. That necessity changes everything, because when a road matters deeply enough, people do not wait for perfect conditions. They wait for conditions that are just acceptable enough, and then they move. On Zoji La, the real tension comes from that threshold, not safety, but temporary permission. Far to the north, in Alaska, the Dalton Highway reveals another type of danger entirely. It is famous for remoteness, but remoteness alone does not explain its power. Plenty of roads are lonely. The Dalton is lonely in a way that changes consequences. A mechanical problem is no longer an inconvenience. Bad timing is no longer a delay. Distance stretches every mistake. This road pushes north through vast terrain toward the oil fields at Deadhorse, crossing river valleys, tundra, and mountain country, with long service gaps and serious weather exposure. Gravel sections throw stone and dust. Trucks dominate the rhythm. Adigan Pass can be hit by avalanches and deep drifting snow. Snow may arrive when much of the rest of the continent still thinks it is summer. And winter does not merely lower temperatures, it narrows options. In a place like this, the road can feel less like infrastructure and more like a thin operating line across an indifferent landscape. There are no crowds to witness your trouble, no dense grid of alternate routes, no easy shelter. The Dalton reminds us that one of the oldest forms of danger is still one of the strongest, to be far away when something goes wrong. Then there are roads where the mountain is not just steep or snowy, but actively unstable. Pakistan's Karakoram Highway runs through one of the most dramatic mountain corridors on Earth, a route shaped by collision, uplift, water, and gravity on a gigantic scale. The danger here is not concentrated in a single famous turn. It is distributed across the entire idea of the road. Slopes fail, rocks fall, rivers rise with rain and meltwater. Flash floods can tear through sections of route that were passable hours before. Landslides can trap vehicles in both directions, turning travel into waiting and waiting into vulnerability. Yet the highway remains essential, a strategic and economic link between Pakistan and China, and a lifeline for communities that do not have the luxury of simply avoiding risk. That tension gives the road its documentary force. On one side, extraordinary scenery, bare cliffs, braided rivers, hanging glaciers, peaks that seem to stand outside human scale. On the other, a constant reminder that in such terrain, the road is never truly finished. It is repaired, reopened, defended, watched, and damaged again. To drive here is to move through a landscape that is still building itself. By the time we reach Russia's Far East, the film has shown roads threatened by cliffs, tides, snow, and landslides. but the Colima Highway changes the emotional temperature. Officially, it is the R504. Colloquially, it is often called the Road of Bones. Some of the darkest claims attached to that name have been repeated for decades and should be handled carefully. Memory hardens into legend on roads like this, but the broader truth is well established and grim enough on its own. The route grew out of Stalin-era expansion into Colima, where forced labor helped build infrastructure across one of the most severe inhabited environments on Earth. The camps, the transport system, the mining economy, the cold, and the road are part of the same history. Today, the highway stretches through enormous distance between Yakutia and Magadan, across forest, rivers, permafrost, and settlements that can feel temporary against the scale of the land. In some seasons, the road is more manageable than its reputation suggests. In others, its remoteness becomes the story. What gives Colima its final weight is not a single dramatic bend. It is accumulation. Miles of isolation, miles of cold, miles of remembered suffering built into a route that still functions in the present tense. On some dangerous roads, you feel the cliff. On this one, you feel the past. And that may be the deeper truth about roads like these. They are not dangerous only because humans are reckless, or because engineers failed, or because nature is cruel. They are dangerous because roads are promises. Promises that one place can be reached from another, that supplies can move, that families can return, that a country can hold together across terrain that resists being crossed. In Bolivia, France, New Zealand, India, Alaska, Pakistan, and Russia, the details are different, but the pattern is the same. Again and again, people have looked at cliff, tide, snow, wilderness, and unstable mountain and decided that crossing still mattered. That is why these roads endure, not as tourist slogans, not as myths, but as working lines through places where movement has always carried a price. Some threaten with gravity, some with water, some with weather, some with distance, and some with the knowledge of what it took to build them in the first place. A road is supposed to reduce uncertainty. These roads do the opposite. They expose it. Every crossing becomes a negotiation between human intention and the larger forces waiting outside the windshield. And on the most dangerous roads in the world, the unsettling part is not that they exist, it is that they are still necessary.